You want to write off your vacation. I get it, but there's a right way and a wrong way to do it. But the wrong way could cost you the deduction, get you into an audit, and be very expensive. I'm a tax attorney. My name's Brian Boyd. I have a master's degree in tax law from Georgetown University, and I practiced at one of the big four in Washington, D.C. before coming to Nashville and becoming a partner at the firm I'm at now. I've been doing tax strategy and giving tax advice and counsel to people for over 20 years. And those people range from the small business owner to the billionaire class. So thanks for being here, and I hope this helps you save money on your taxes. Just start an LLC and everything will be okay. You can write it all off. Yeah, no, that's not how that works. Here's the problem with that. An LLC in and of itself is not a business. It is a legal entity. And that entity actually has to have substance behind it. People and influencers online talk all the time about just setting up an LLC, and quite frankly, that's not how it works. So if you have an Etsy store, hey, good for you, but having an Etsy store and having the money flow into the LLC doesn't by itself make it a business. Let's get into what actually makes it a business, because the IRS cares. Under tax law, you have a business when you have regular activity. You're in that enterprise to make money and a profit. The IRS has a checklist they run through, and it's about 6 bullet points. Did you actually research this industry before you jumped into it? Do you have real experience in this industry? How much time are you putting in? And that's an important one. And that falls under an analysis under section 469, the passive activity loss rules. That is something that I'll talk about in other videos, but just know there's a code section that kind of dovetails into this, and you have to pay attention to it. The fourth one, when you hit losses, did you adjust? Did you try to make a profit and just didn't hit it? The fifth, would this activity survive without your other income propping it up? For example, if you have that Etsy store, are you only funding that Etsy store from your other W-2 income? Or is this Etsy store able to stand on its own 2 feet? And the last one, is there a personal reason you would keep this store going even if it never made a profit? And I ask that question because that sounds more like a hobby and not a business. If those questions made you a little nervous, that's your answer. If there is no legitimate business under the tax law, there's no deduction for travel, period. But if you have a real business and your intent is to make a profit, then you're already way ahead of a great chunk of people trying to take this deduction. Now let's go to step 2. Book one business meeting and you can write off the whole trip, flights, hotels, meals, all of it. I wish. Under Internal Revenue Code section 162A, it has to be ordinary, necessary, and primarily for business. Always, always. Now, there's an analysis here that the courts look at and you need to pay attention to it, because the ordinary and necessary, fine. But the primarily for business, that's where we're gonna have to focus a lot of your attention. Ordinary means it's common in your field. Necessary means it's for the production of income in your business. You need to do this. But just know, ordinary and necessary are not the hurdles here. Primarily for business is the hurdles, and that is where the tax court focuses its attention. Now, I actually like the strategy of bookending a trip with business meetings. If you schedule a business meeting on the first day and schedule a business meeting on the last day, that's great. But you know what? That Disneyland trip with your family for 4 days in between, it's not gonna fly. The IRS is not gonna say that your fast pass was an expensable business expense. You can only legitimately write off the first day and the last day. And you're gonna have to carve out those middle days. And here's how the court weighs this. There are 3 factors. How much time did you spend on business versus personal activities? How directly was the business activity tied to your core work? And could you have done that an hour from your house. How significant were the personal activities on your trip? Now, there are some famous court cases around this specific deduction, and let's talk about those. I'm not going to give you case names because, quite frankly, who cares? Unless you're a lawyer, who cares? But the first one is about a professor that was invited to teach at the University of Cairo for 2 weeks. Well, he goes, he teaches for 2 weeks, he comes home, and he says, hey, I'm going to write this off. And he does. Well, the IRS challenges it, and he takes it to tax court. The tax court said, wait a minute, this man was teaching for 2 weeks in Cairo. Yes, he spent some time with his family, but he was teaching and lecturing for 2 weeks. There's no other place he could have done this because the University of Cairo is not exactly going to move its location to Kansas so he can travel there. So he had to travel to Cairo. So that's a deductible expense. And his time there with his family, that was ancillary to the purpose of the trip. The court said that was ordinary, necessary, and primarily for his business. Now, here's one that actually should make you pucker a little bit, because this kind of shocked me as well when I read it. There are 2 cases, 2 different taxpayers, 2 different years, but the facts are almost identical. There is a doctor, and he was sponsored by the American Medical Association to go to a seminar. He goes to the seminar and he has 28 hours of coursework that he's undertaken and taught. However, when he comes home and writes it off, he thinks, oh, I'm untouchable. I don't have to worry about this. This is easy. It was even sponsored by the AMA. Well, the tax court thought differently, and here's why. They said, wait a minute, you were out there for a week, you did 28 hours of coursework and lecturing, but you also took 3 sightseeing tours. That time was almost as much, if not more, than your lecturing and your class time. The court denied it, and that's that. Understand that these 2 different professionals who were doing almost similar things, traveling to take this deduction, they were denied for the scrutiny undertaken by the tax court on the point of, was it primarily for business? So intent, substance, and proportion is very necessary to the calculus that you have to undertake to achieve a proper deduction here. But even if your trip clears that bar, there's a step that most people skip that wipes it all out. And it has nothing to do with how you spent your time. Just keep your receipts and you're covered. That's not enough. It's not even close. Congress has specifically flagged business travel and said it's an area of the deduction that is prone to abuse. Now, there's a reason they flagged it for abuse, is because you could take your wife out for dinner and put it on your business card, take it as a deduction, and yeah, you probably didn't talk about your day at the office with your wife related to that particular client who had a contract that you were just trying to dig through. That's why they flagged this. So in order to clear that hurdle, there are 4 things you need to capture on the back of that receipt. The amount spent, where you were traveling to, or where you were when you took this expense, like which restaurant, what city is it in, the specific purpose of the trip and the meal and the expense. And lastly, the business relationship of anyone else involved. For example, if I took one of my law associates to lunch, I would put down their name, associate, we discussed this, here's where we are, and this is what we were talking about. Now let's talk about when you identify what goes on the back of the receipt. It is not 6 months later. Do it contemporaneously with what you're doing. So after the meal, as you pay the bill, write all that stuff down on the back of the receipt, stuff it in your pocket, get up and leave. I say that from experience. I met a hedge fund manager when I was in the Cayman Islands this summer, and frankly, we talked business, we had drinks together, he's already referred me some business, so that is an ordinary, necessary, and primarily for business purpose, and I properly documented it. That's what I'm trying to help you understand. You've got to properly document your deduction here. Because if you don't, the IRS can deny all of it, even if it is legitimate. Even if you did spend that money, even if you did go to that bar, even if you did talk to that person, They're going to reject it all. Now, there is a thing in tax law called the Cohen rule. And that is typically when people don't have perfect records. They give you a little bit of leeway, but not here. But the fix is very simple. Just take 5 minutes of your day, anything you spent, go into your phone, write it up, put it in the details that we just talked about, and you're good. Now let's talk about what happens when you want to take your family along. Put your spouse and kids on the board of directors, pay them a W-2, and write off their travel as well. All this is doing is inviting an audit. First of all, putting your wife and kids on the board of directors, is it legitimate? Well, first of all, being on a board of directors is not a W-2 position. They're not employees. They're an independent board of directors. So that's not going to work. Under Section 274M3, family members' expenses are deductible if they meet 3 criteria. The first criteria is they are actually an employee. The second criteria is they have to be necessary for the business trip. And the third criteria is they could have deducted those expenses if they had taken them themselves, but the business paid for it, so the business gets those deductions. Now it has to be all 3, not 2 out of 3, it has to be all 3. If it's not all 3, it's no deduction for you. But if your spouse is a W-2 employee, is legitimately there for the business, and it's necessary for them to be there so you can conduct this business while you're traveling, it's legit. Take the deduction. And if you've been dreaming about taking an international trip this whole time while you've been watching this video, I've got some news for you. The IRS has 2 extra rules on top of everything else. Book an international trip to Bora Bora. It's international. The IRS can't touch you. Man, I wish that were true. But the fact is, international travel gets extra scrutiny. There are 2 extra rules associated with this. Rule 1 is the allocation rule. So for trips that are 7 days or fewer, you need to split your time between personal and business travel, right? That's an important thing to do. And personal time is under 25% of the total of the trip. Anything outside of those very narrow parameters, you have to do an allocation of how you spent your time and proportionally allocate that to where it goes. Is it business or is it personal? The second rule is the necessity rule. And here's how the IRS looks at it and how the tax courts have agreed with the IRS in their view of this particular issue. Could this trip have achieved the same result via a Zoom conference? Could it be done here in the United States or North America? Does it have to be overseas? Does it have to be international? But here's the thing. If the international trip was truly necessary and it could only be performed at that location, you're good. That's a win for you. It is ordinary, necessary, and primarily for business. The rule exists to stop abuse, not to stop you from taking the deduction. If you do it right, and I hope you have, you get the deduction, and that's great. And maybe you got to see Big Ben while you're at it. Look, I've seen people lose thousands of dollars on this. You did the work. You spent the money. You took the trip. You just got it wrong. You got wrong advice. You listened to an influencer or a content creator, and you didn't know how to put all the pieces together because, quite frankly, a 30-second clip on TikTok, YouTube, or somewhere else isn't going to help you. But now you know how to fix it. Let's take the deduction right. So let's recap this. So it has to be ordinary, necessary, and primarily for business. If you want to bookend it, I love that idea. It's a great strategy. Just carve out the piece that isn't business. It's pretty simple. If you have a spouse and they are doing legitimate work and they are necessary to the trip and they are there primarily for the business of the entity that you're operating, it's legit. Take it, but do it right. And document it. Remember, document. Contemporaneous documentation is so valuable. The rules aren't complicated once you actually know them. Compliance is necessary. You have to comply. However, planning like this is actual strategy. And if this helped you, I'm glad. Please click the link below if you liked it, if it helped you. I'd love that. Subscribe if you want to follow along with more tax tips like this. I want to make tax law available to everybody. You don't necessarily need a master's degree in tax law after having gone to law school to understand the tax code. I do this content for you. Thanks for being here.